It's Sunday, July 13, 2025. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5 Minute News. Our guest today is a veteran Democratic political strategist, analyst, commentator, and author of the Hopium Chronicles on Substack. Simon Rosenberg, welcome back to the Weekend Show.
It's great to be here.
Simon, it's very testing times for a lot of people, and I know you're feeling it as I am. In your writings, I noticed you described Trump's presidency as flagging and in need of revival. You said the American people are not buying what Trump is selling. Do you think there's enough noise being made about his struggles rather than the media just presenting things as successes?
No, I think that this is part of the reason I've been sort of hitting this very hard the last few weeks. I mean, if I can just quickly go through what I think has happened over the last few weeks, we know what he's done, right? The passage of the bill and the escalation of ICE. But I think we have to go back a month ago or so to his breakup with Elon. I think this was really a seismic event in the evolution of Trump 2.0. His approval rating had been coming up. He had been doing far better. He had taken a huge political hit after the Liberation Day tariffs and was in a place where he ended that first 100-day period as the most unpopular American president in the first 100 days in our history. And then he started recovering. And I think they were feeling good about the country was kind of warming to him again. And then the Elon breakup happened. And I think this was a very big event for Trump in the White House. I think Trump suffered what I call narcissistic injury. I think he was really damaged by this. Elon spent 3 days trashing Trump. And the important thing here is a lot of people trash Trump, but Elon was reaching MAGA. Elon had the ability to break into the MAGA bubble in a way that none of us do. And I think this was really damaging to Trump. And I think it affected his own understanding of his being strong and being powerful. He had his buddy, the richest guy in the world, running around with him like in a buddy movie. And then all of a sudden this guy turns on him. And so within 48 hours of the last set of attacks by Elon on him, right? I mean, Elon called for him to be replaced by J.D. Vance. I mean, this was pretty heavy stuff, right? Is that we had the escalation in Los Angeles, and you saw and then within a few days after that, we had the Marines on the ground. And what was interesting to me is that the country immediately rejected it in the polling. And I was surprised by that, to be honest. I would assumed he would have gotten a little more runway. But I think they were doing that to change the subject, to sort of deal with this damage, because Trump's numbers came down from those attacks from Elon. And then what happened with the escalation, right? The country immediately rejected it. A majority of the country said no to this. This isn't appropriate. I'm not surprised, by the way, based on the history of polling we can get into on immigration. But then the next way he tried to sort of restore his strength, and I use strength in all capital letters, right, was his sad parade that he had where nobody came. And we had millions and millions of people on the street that day that dominated the news. And he had this little paltry little show, that nobody came. So that didn't really work to restore his strength and his power. And then he bombed Iran. And, historically, when presidents take a military action like this, the country rallies behind them. Not this time. I mean, a plurality, a majority of people rejected the Iran bombing. And so that didn't work either. And then they passed the big ugly bill last week. And the polling we've gotten this week, and there has not been extensive polling, but the limited polling we have, he's not gone up in any poll. And in fact, in two of the most important ones, he's actually dropped. So they've tried these various mechanisms to revive his flagging presidency post the Elon attacks, and all of them have failed. And this is a big problem for a politician, right? Like they've tried a lot of different things, and he's still, in current polling, he is arguably either at or below the lowest of any president in history at polling at this point. And you're starting to see, I think, a majority of the country be comfortable in their opposition to him. You know what I mean? Like that anything he does, Iran, forget it, right? Like we don't buy it. And I think all this erosion and struggle that he's had began with the tariffs. I mean, because I think for the tariffs were this fundamental betrayal of his core promise, which was that he was going to make life better for working people, which he immediately turned on and decided that he wasn't going to do that anymore, right? And so I think that he's in a place that the line I use about this is that Trump is weak, he's not strong, he's failing, he's not succeeding. He is a loser, not a winner, and he's far more a villain than a hero. And it's our job to tell that story because it isn't being told by the national media. I mean, in some of the major polls, Trump is at a level that is equal to where Biden was when he decided not to run for re-election. To your point, is that being reflected in the national discourse about his struggle and his failing? Of course it isn't, right? That's part of the reason we're all here, is that we've got a job to do to help, make sure that people understand that, in MAGA bubble, he's young and thin and handsome and virile and strong and powerful and everyone in the world's bending the knee. But in the real world, he's really struggling.
Even the right-wing media, I'm talking about the podcast media, they are disappointed. They are starting on those kind of right-wing shows, far-right shows, former MAGA shows necessarily. They're starting to say, I didn't vote for this. This is not what I wanted. I wanted no wars. And yet here we are in 3. I wasn't expecting my friends to be snatched off the streets indiscriminately. I didn't vote for that. I wanted the criminals to be deported, and yet they're just going for anybody they can reach. I mean, is that an important group, or how important is that group to have them turn on their heels?
Well, and then the Epstein files this week.
Which is huge for them.
Yeah, which I will tell you that in our world, right? I mean, the Midas world has been very aggressive about this, but traditionally those kinds of stories, kind of people in our world kind of shy away from, right? Like they don't really engage. That's not true on their side, right? Yeah. I mean, they've been calling us pedophiles for
Which goes back to Pizzagate and all that stuff as well. Right?
By the way, Pizzagate, which is, I used to take my kids there all the time to that place.
Not to the basement.
It's not in the basement, but it's not to in fact, there isn't a basement, but
that's right.
It's not too far from my house, by the way. So that's a little personal to me. And then I'll say is that, but I think that it is. So what happens when a politician starts to struggle and lose control of the discourse is what you're describing, right? That people start thinking like, this isn't going so well. So like I have more freedom to be critical. And what I have written about, and this comes from an article that G. Elliott Morris published, who has a great Substack called Strength in Numbers. He was the head of 538, and his 538's been shut down, and he's now sort of taken on some of what 538 did at his new platform. And he showed something that I've been writing about for years, that there is the independent polling that we have that shows Trump down -10, -11, having fallen between 15 and 20 points since his first week, which is a very significant decline. And then there are these red wave Dear Leader polls that show him up by 10 points, show him, representing like a completely different country, right? And the thing is, those polls didn't exist prior to the fall of 2022. They tried it out. They were able to persuade the media that a red wave was coming that wasn't, through these fake polls. They continued them through the whole, in the election in 2024. And now they've become institutionalized. Now they're happening every 2 weeks, once a month. It depends on the poll. And they're doing it to create movement in the polling average, to make things look like they're not as bad. But I think what's happened on the right is that these polls have been instrumental for Trump to keep his coalition together. Because in the right, what I was saying is that he's young and virile and thin and, successful, is that part of that has been that the polls they're seeing, he's up by 5 points and 7 points, right? He's popular and he's respected, and it's all fake, right? Yeah. Like it's all invented.
Well, the country's back, apparently. I mean, it's never been better.
right. I mean, no, but I love the fact, I've been saying for the last week, we need to have fun with this, because on some levels, Trump is such an absurd and ridiculous figure. And I think one of the things I've been talking a lot about is that there needs to be an entire, and maybe Midas can do this, an entire site that's just basically about mocking him, right? And, his color, his burnt orange this week and his makeup, right?
Yeah.
Like it's been put on really poorly. And he
kind of got tangoed on Wednesday.
He looks far more like a clown this week than he has. And I think that part of what's happened is that the decline that we've seen in real polling has not been replicated on their side. And so there's this hermetically sealed info bubble, right, where he's strong and powerful and everybody loves him and everything else. However, these podcasters and people that you're talking about, the people who live in the information space, see these other polls, right? Yeah. They're not voters who don't pay much attention. They pay attention. And it's indisputable that he's gone through a very significant and meaningful decline very rapidly, even on immigration, right? Like that's, And so I think for those people who are more in the information world, they're at least aware that he's starting to fall, right? They may not be saying it on air, but I think what you're seeing is, and I use the term circle of defiance, right? The circle of defiance is growing. The people who are willing to defy the false memes, the false narratives, the false impressions of strength are even now extending to, Joe Rogan and to this sort of podcaster universe. And I think the thing that we are never going to really totally understand is the role that the Epstein issues are playing in all of this. And I'm going to demonstrate enormous humility about this because I don't really know that I totally understand. But we just had reports, on Friday that, and I'm going to mispronounce his name, Dan Bongino, maybe quitting the FBI,
right,
over fights over the Epstein files, right? We also saw late Friday reports that people had gone into the metadata on the FBI, the unedited FBI video, and learned that it's actually been edited, right? And we knew it was edited, but now there's actually like proof and confirmation that they lied about the video. And now we're starting to get into a place of, I think two things are happening. One is like, this is like getting weird, right? And hard to defend. And people are starting to behave like this is kind of a crazy scandal, right? And that something bad is underneath all this. The second thing it's doing is that it's introducing to a lot of voters, younger voters and newer voters, who didn't know the whole Trump story because we didn't really run a lot of negative ads about Trump in 2024. They're learning about the fact about Epstein and about him, raping E. Jean Carroll in a department store dressing room and the other sort of the part of Trump that we all know that I think many newer voters, younger voters, people who are less consumers of political information didn't know. And all of a sudden, this stuff is now getting played. I mean, the simple video of him and Epstein looking at the young girls, right?
That's right.
And that
choosing their favorite.
Right,
but the fact that they were neighbors, I mean, this is the other thing. People forget that these people literally lived at the ends of each other's street.
Right. No, it's so, and I mean, Epstein described Trump as like his best friend, right? Like, yeah. I mean, this is like the idea that Trump, and the truth is that Bondi, just lied. Like they're lying now too about things that happened like a few months ago that are on video. Right. And frankly, Midas has done an incredible job in documenting all this. I mean, this has been sort of, I think, one of Midas's finest moments, to be honest, in terms of breaking through the horse shit that, comes through here. And so I think that what happens when when things start to unravel, right? I mean, I have this line that sometimes the wheels on the bus go round and round, and sometimes the wheels come flying off. And, right now, I feel like there's this sense, look, he was supposed to have this week was supposed to be his victory lap week. Right?
Oh yeah, he was gonna solve the Gaza crisis.
Right, solve Gaza. He had his buddy BB coming to visit. Right, Monday morning. Right, they got he had the B whatever is flying overhead in the White House on Saturday, and this was his big week, and it started with hundreds of people dying in Texas because of their malfeasance and because of their ridiculous assault on our government. And then, we've now had this complete confusion and craziness around Ukraine, whatever the heck is going on. I don't think anybody really knows what's happening there, right?
Not least Trump.
Not least Trump.
Right.
He had some of his wildest performances that we've had since he's been president. He looked really like crazy, like his makeup made him look, crazy. And so this ended up being a really bad week for him, in a week that was supposed to, again, be the week that the ship got righted, right? And then the Epstein stuff, and in that presser or in the cabinet room, and he's like, "Why are you asking me about this? This isn't as important."
Right.
And his immigration escalation stuff, we just got on Friday, there was a Gallup poll, and Gallup's a slightly right-leaning polling outfit, by the way, showing Trump, the country, unbelievably rejecting his immigration approach. We had record numbers who said that immigrants are good for the country, the highest ever recorded in
it was 1810 Americans, 79% said immigration is a good thing for the country, which is an increase from 64% a year ago and a high point in 25 years.
I mean, it's an unbelievable, I'm from New York, so I speak this way sometimes, but it's just an unbelievable fuck you to Trump, right? And so, on something that is the core of Trumpism, right? I mean, the exploitation of racial fear and the demonization of others is the energy that fuels all of Trumpism. And the country has he's pushed the country to a place where they're more appreciative of immigrants than they've ever been. Donald, that was a little hard to do, by the way, brother, and so I think that part of what's important for us is to stay grounded in what is true, right? And also, though, we have to develop some capacity to convey the absurdity of what we're now witnessing every day. And the Hegseth stuff, the disappearance of Tulsi Gabbard, right? All of this, I don't know what the right analogy is. Benny Hill, Monty Python, Veep, right? Whatever it's become comedic gold every day. And we have to be able to do that at the same time where we're having real conversations about the threat of of ICE and a roided up ICE that's going to become potentially, Trump in his own sort of authoritarian fantasies is going to turn this into some kind of Gestapo or whatever they think this is going to be. We've got real problems in the country and that he's doing enormous harm, and we have to continue to work every day forthrightly, eyes wide open, to mitigate that harm, and can't look away. But at the same time, the guy does feel he's all that, but he's also this incredible buffoon and clown. And we have to be able to live in both of those places at the same time, I think.
The problem with him being a clown, though, is it dilutes the threat of authoritarianism. Certainly the media, and I know in Europe and in the UK, the way they cover him is like a clown.
Right.
Whereas here they call him Mr. President, and they actually kind of boost him, put him on a pedestal. But it does kind of soften the edges of the dictatorship. The fact that he is wearing clown makeup and the fact that he can't finish a sentence. It doesn't, those things aren't stopping the fact that he has a group of really evil people around him, from Miller to Homan and everybody else, who are the real dictators. I mean, people like Russell Vogt, most people have never heard of. Right. And yet he is the architect of Project 2025, and he's right there in the center of it all. And so that's my concern, is that we could be lulled into a false sense of security that, it's not all that bad because he's an idiot. But actually, the future does look very dangerous.
Well, I think this is an incredibly important conversation, because I think that the way that we defeat him, I've come to believe, is that, our politics, we contest issues, right? Medicaid, big ugly bill, tariffs, right? But I think there's an area and a dimension of our politics that we're not contesting, which is this issue of him being strong or weak, winning, losing, hero, villain, and succeeding, failing. I think there's an entire dimension of our politics where he operates almost entirely in that dimension, right? He's winning, even that when he released that cologne last week. Right.
Ode to Trump. Yeah.
Ode to Trump. I mean, it was unbelievable, right? The cologne, literally in his phrases is this is for people who are winning, successful, and strong. Like literally the words that I've been using. And I've been talking about him being young and thin. And yesterday they released this Superman, or not yesterday, but a few days ago, they released this Superman image
without a shred of irony.
Right. With him being young and thin, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, and because they have to paint a false picture of him. And the assertion of this false picture is actually like the central project of the entire Trump White House, right? Because the ugliness of the reality, or the emperor really has no clothes. And with this emperor, him having no clothes, like none of us want to see that, right? Or whatever the analogy, we got to pull the curtain back from the wizard. But I think what I'm saying is that we have to contest his strength and power. And one of the ways that we have to do that, we have to deny him that. We have to deny him strength and power and winning and success and heroism. We have to take that away from him, because then what's left is ugly extremism and incredible bigotry and a failed economy and a reckless economic approach and a gutting of science, right? What's preventing all of that reality from being seen properly is this perception that he's strong and winning. And so I think that we made a mistake about this in 2024. I think one of the reasons we lost the election is that Kamala Harris came out of the debate strong and had beaten him. She was winning in the polls. She was raising crazy amounts of money. She was strong and he was weak. And then she said, I'm the underdog. Yeah. And she positioned herself as weak and not strong. And she made him strong, and she was no longer weak.
He would never do that himself, would he? He's on top no matter
he's always
what
winning.
The polls are saying.
If you go back to the interviews during the election in 2024, it is every interview I heard, he started the same way. I'm ahead in the polls and I'm winning. That's how he started every single interview. It didn't matter what the question was. It didn't matter. I'm ahead. I'm winning. I feel, the polls for me are better today than they've ever been. Yeah. Right? He used to say this all the time.
Right. But that's brainwashing. I mean, it's very clever.
But it's also a way of obscuring his ugliness, because if he's winning and people are going with him, then I got to go with the winner, right? Like he must be succeeding. And that's why I think part of what I'm arguing today is that we have to develop a new muscle or a new understanding, that we have to contest this issue of him being strong and weak as a central undertaking of the collective project, which to me includes ridicule and mocking and making him into a clown and or into a predator or into whatever it is that we're going to do, because then that denies his strength and it gets it harder for him. We need to make him look like the failure that we all know that he really is, right? As a central project. And I think this is a new thing we have to work through as a family. And we need to pull on it, and we need to do more research on it. The way that we poll in democratic politics is that we're very issue heavy, right? Like we poll on issues. We don't poll on these leadership dimensions. And I'll give you an example. In the exit, it's not something we test. We don't develop understandings of this. And there's a long history to why this is, right? But in the exit polls on the question of strong leader, weak leader, Trump beat Kamala Harris by 2-1. How in the world can she become president if only 32% of voters viewed her as a strong leader? And I think, and I will just tell you, having been in the guts of this stuff for over 30 years, we don't really even think about strong leader, weak leader. We don't think about winning and losing. We think about Medicaid and tariffs, right?
Well, goodness, ultimately. It's good versus evil in some ways, in its simplest form.
Virtue versus malevolence or whatever it is. And I think we have to get smarter about recognizing that for a lot of voters, low political information voters, whether somebody is strong and they're a winner and that they're successful is actually like a major part of how they develop their political understanding about leaders. And we're not even really contesting that space adequately. And so I think this is an area, what I'm proposing here is that, we need to take I'm trying to answer your really good question, by the way, about how we can do both. We have to ridicule him and diminish him and make him small and not big, while at the same time being clear-eyed about the threat that he represents. And I think that if I can just say one last thing is that part of the reason, I've been a little bit more optimistic in this week than I've been, frankly, in a while, despite all the ugliness of what's happened in recent weeks, is that I think we have I'm now speaking as a political strategist now, right? As somebody who has been in campaigns I think we have an enormous opportunity to take his struggles with the public, the consistent rejection of his major initiatives, Iran, the budget bill, right, and immigration, and really go on offense for the next 5 months to really further degrade him, further erode his standing, and to start to begin to tell our story more effectively as we need to, and to use what are going to be, I think, an enormous opportunity, which is that the budget that now has to pass, the reconciliation bill was a very narrow, specific set of things, but the Senate and House have to pass an annual budget. The fiscal year starts October 1st. They have to, usually it gets passed in December. That budget is going to have all this ugly stuff that just came in the reconciliation bill is going to go into now an annual appropriations. And all the things like the cuts of NOAA, the cuts of FEMA, the cuts of NIH, I mean, all these other things they've done, all also are about to get institutionalized in this budget. And so we have a huge opportunity nationally to re-engage the public in the malevolence that and the harms that these guys are fostering upon us, right? And also, I think state leaders have the ability now to start conversations in the states about what's coming down the pike, from Washington, and how, healthcare is being weakened and our prices are increasing and the deficit is exploding and they're abandoning any responsibility to protect us from storms and disasters. And, they're allowing disease to run wild. State leaders now have a huge opportunity to engage in the national conversation, to amplify what's happening at the federal level. And I think that, I'm optimistic now that as somebody who's been in the game for a long time, that the stuff that's in front of us is powerful and meaningful, and we have to just shove this stuff down their throat as hard as we possibly can and to continue to degrade them and help. We have a responsibility to talk to our fellow Americans about the harms that are being done by the Republicans to them, and we cannot shirk that responsibility for 1 second.
Have you noticed, as I have, that when it comes to facts and figures, whether it be jobs numbers or GDP or just how well the country is doing, Trump now has put truth to one side, and is bringing his own set of figures that often are thought of in the moment, and unfortunately some of the media run with that information. And this worries me a lot. Now, some are so extreme, like I brought down the price of eggs by 900%, which would suggest that the grocery store should be paying us. But aside from that, it is quite easy to fudge the numbers. And because he's the president, nobody questions him. And a lot of these networks just kind of say what he said, the kind of age-old journalistic copy and paste situation. That's my greatest concern, is that we're not actually experiencing any truth out of the Ministry of Information anymore. I
think it's an enormous issue. And I go back to this issue about the polling, right? There was fake polling in 2022. There was fake polling in 2024.
Well, they bought the polling companies. I mean, they set up their own polling companies.
Yeah, no, I mean, and the thing is, these polls had an impact on our understanding of his strength. Right. This was they wouldn't have been spending all this money on these polls and doing all this work if it wasn't actually helping them. Right. I mean, this is the whole thing. Right. And, and some people in the business mocked me for making this argument. What do you mean they're faking polls? And it was like, after, trying to overturn an American election and install a government into the United States in 2021, faking a bunch of polls is like, miniature golf compared to what they had done in 2021. And the idea that somehow this wasn't, that the manipulation of the information environment wasn't like the central project of Trumpism, right? And yeah, I think we should be worried that they've already been faking poll data and, for 3 years now, right? Yeah. And that it's not a big stretch to believe that they would start doing this with basic economic data, right? And yeah, it's worrisome. But I will say that, again, I think one of the things we have to be sanguine about, or be more, to give ourselves a little bit of credit, right, is that however we end up getting to the other side of what is in front of us now, it had to start with his approval rating collapsing. And, and that's happened basically, right? And he's lost, according to the Economist YouGov poll, 44 points in job approval with young people, 18 to 29-year-olds since the beginning of January, since January, right? I mean, so this idea that despite their information superiority, their daily manipulation of the media, that they have been unable to control this, again, after repeated efforts, despite fake polling, despite the fact that the big ugly went so negative, right?
Yeah.
Shows that there are limitations to their ability to manipulate all of this.
Yeah, well, people feel it, don't they? I mean, the gas prices is a perfect example. Yeah. He's on about $1.99, and the cheapest you can find it anywhere in the country is $3.17. But that's a reality,
right? I think that's what I mean. Like, I think there is. I think that there are limitations to the bullshit machine.
Yeah,
and they're running into it. Right? They've run into it because there's no possibility in any of their planning that he would be at where he is in polling right now. There's no possibility that they ever believed that the big ugly bill would be at -15, -20 before they vote on it. There was no way. And what it shows is that he's not invulnerable, that those of us operating in the information space that you are, is that we're having wins here, right? Like these late breaking voters, these low political information voters that swung to Trump, they have swung again. They have left him. They have not come to us yet, but they've wandered from him. And that's a sign that they, that in this ambient information that even low political information voters are kind of getting the message that this guy isn't what they thought he was going to be.
Well, they're all scrolling social media and they're all seeing the military snatching people off the streets. And if that is not an example of what is happening versus what he says is happening, I don't know what is.
I think that you're correct about this. And I'm not an expert on TikTok and Instagram. I don't spend my time. I do a lot of stuff, but this is not an area that I spend my time. I have been surprised at the virality, right, of the snatching videos. It is, those things have taken off.
Yeah.
And it has become a defining visual image of the early Trump. I think what you just said is incredibly important. And I've written about this and commented on this, is that I think for a lot of young people, this has become a defining visuals image of early Trumpism.
And it's not just the snatching, Simon. It's the pushback in the videos. It's the people shouting shame, shame, shame at these federal agents. It's the friends and families fighting and literally pulling on people's arms to prevent them from being put into unmarked vehicles by unmarked officers. It's the fight back that I think people are also seeing.
It's also the protests. The fact that we had millions of people on the street peacefully protesting, right? I think that was an incredibly important moment. The No Kings protests were really, I think, sort of affirmative. Many of them were joyful and celebratory.
And it's made for social media, that stuff.
Right.
I mean,
and that stuff, it broke through. And I think, I'll give you an example of this. My daughter's 19 and she is studying to be a doctor as of now. And I hope she goes through with it. It's a hard journey, as we all know. And she's not very political, she's just not. I think growing up in this house, I think that two of my three kids, kids always defy their parents, right? So two of my three kids are not very political and she's not very political. And she's currently in London studying and for a brief period. And the day the big ugly bill passed, she texted me and said, "I just want you to know that I'm crying right now about this." And I was so shocked, right? She's in London. This is far away. She's having a great time. She's working really hard. She's doing intro to psych courses at the LSE this summer, and she's having a great time. But the emotional outpouring about the passage of this bill, and I had never had a conversation with her about this, right? Like I had no idea that she was this. And so I do think that there is becoming kind of an understanding that he's betrayed us, that he isn't what he thought, that people thought he was going to be, that it is, I use the line that, his strategy is more for me and less for everybody else. And I think people are feeling it. And to your point, it's showing up and manifesting in the new media space in ways like the Epstein stuff. I mean, for people who I respect who study this, say the Epstein stuff has become really huge in, youth-oriented media. And it's not dissipating, right? And these things can change, can create new understandings for people, right, that they didn't have before. And it's consistent with this idea that he's betraying us, that he lied to us, that he misled us, that he was not truthful with us. And as you know, I had an interview with Tara McGowan this week from Courier Newsroom, who's one of my favorite people in the world. And
yeah, same.
She talked about trust. And I think that, being so central to the new media world, right? People trust your microphone and your glasses and your space, and they trust my dorky room here with my son and the little, cardinal that he painted, and my dog's, my dog photo, my dog's drawing over there, my little dorky room here. People come to sort of trust these places, my polo shirts, right? And I think trust has been broken with Trump, with a lot of people. And I think that, I was on a podcast with Stuart Stevens recently, who was last Bush's media consultant. And he said that after Katrina, there was nothing they could do to fix it. There was nothing they could do. He said it was Katrina broke Bush. There was no way to repair it at that point. And it didn't matter what they did. It was just over, basically. And the country sort of just gave up on him. I'm not saying Trump is there, but he's a lot closer to being there at this point than I would have expected, to be honest, given his
6
strong
months.
It's quick. And I will tell you that there's things like what happened in Texas, where there's no question the federal government has culpability in the deaths of those young girls. And there's no question about it. There's no other side to the story. And, and just like, by the way, there's no question that the vaporization of USAID and our abandonment of our global responsibilities will kill tens of millions of people, including 5 million children, and that Donald Trump and Elon Musk now will go down in history as mass murderers. And there's no question about that any longer. To me, the vaporization of AID, and for those who follow Hopium know that when that happened, I kind of spent a lot of time around the significance. I've worked with AID. I understand what AID does.
Well, it's one of the greatest things that America created. I mean, I think people forget that. They thought it was just foreign aid, but the soft power, the influence, you can't really go without it.
AID was in 100 countries.
Yeah.
100 countries.
Yeah.
And for most people in the world, their understanding of America was through USAID. This was one of our, if not the single most important, other than Beyonce and, and Ariana Grande and other, pop stars and stuff, movie stars. The USAID was a central part of our soft power, ecosystem. And because it saved people's lives. I mean, it was deeply meaningful to people in these countries, to the governments of these countries. There was enormous gratitude. And it's why the fact that we vaporized it so quickly, because to me, this was so deeply meaningful about what we were really up against. Because if you are comfortable knowingly killing millions of people by your actions and your policies, you've crossed a line that, means that kind of sensibility is going to come to us here domestically in the US, right? Trump already has crossed the line, right, of accepting mass death on things that he's done.
Multiple times, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah.
So the idea that he's going to cut Medicaid and have lots of people die, or that he's allowing, measles, he's making measles great again, or this
But that is the plan, though, isn't it? The plan is to kill people. The plan is to
kill people.
To eradicate the poor and people of color.
Right.
We have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and talk about something that you've been writing about that very few people are really kind of focusing in on, which I've always been fascinated in, and that is Trump's view and the administration's view of eugenics. We'll do that next here on The Weekend Show. Listen, we can't fix everything going on in the news, but one thing you can improve is the food you feed your cat, thanks to our partner, Smalls. When the world inevitably goes downhill, which, let's be honest, it's not looking great right now. You know what the first thing is that I'm going to make sure I have with me? No, it's not my closest friends or family, it's my cat, Shuby, and his favorite cat food, Smalls. If you're a regular listener to this show, you'll know that Shuby cannot live without Smalls, and to get 60% off your first order plus free shipping, head to smalls.com/weekend for a limited time only. Smalls cat food is protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients that you'll find in your fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. That's why Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. Smalls also has a bunch of amazing treats and snacks you can add to your order. Shuby loves the fresh ground bird that came in the most recent Smalls box. After switching to Smalls, 88% of cat owners reported overall health improvements. That's a big deal. And the team at Smalls is so confident that your cat will love their products that you can try it risk-free. That means they will refund you if your cat won't eat the food. What are you waiting for? Give your cat the food they deserve. For a limited time only, and because you're a Weekend Show viewer, you can get 60% off your first Smalls order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/weekend. That's 60% off when you head to smalls.com/weekend plus free shipping. Again, that's smalls.com/weekend. We're back on the Weekend Show with Simon Rosenberg. I'm Anthony Davis. Simon, you've written and spoken about eugenics, and I think it's something that people can't really connect to what is happening right now. But I think as we take a step back and we look at the combination, not just of the dismantling of USAID, which was done in basically 7 days. I mean, really, that organization should have taken 7 years to deconstruct properly. Then you've got the mass deportations on a scale never seen, the investment of $150 billion to create this secret police force to take the removal of people of color off the streets to the next level. Trump has spoken about eugenics over the years in various ways. Great genes, the bloodlines. Elon Musk, same. They're all in on it. J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel. This is something that is really important to them. It was also important to the Nazis and Adolf Hitler as well. So maybe that's where people are drawing comparisons, because they are referring to how America looks right now and saying that it does look like Nazi Germany. For those that don't quite understand this, just explain your view of eugenics and how it connects to this Trump regime currently.
I'm going to be very honest that when I enter into this space, I struggle a little bit because it's so hard to believe that this is something we're even talking about.
Yes.
And, I'm of Jewish ancestry, right? And, these are difficult topics for all of us. But I think there are just two things I want to say about this is that, the racial purity of the Nazis, which as anyone who studied history has some rudimentary understanding of, that there was a sense that there was a superior set of people who were superior over others, right? Like, let's dumb this down very simply, and that there were people who were worthy and there were people that were unworthy. And the people that were unworthy needed to go away in various ways, right? And put into concentration camps and removed from society because they were poisoning the blood, is to use the term from that time.
Well, but from this time as well. He's used
right.
That phrase
the direct evocation of Nazi language by the Trump world has been, for anyone who's studied this stuff, has been shocking, alarming, kind of unbelievable. But the other piece of this, right, I want to speak to, because this is a thing that I think has not gotten as much attention, is that in this kind of eugenicist view of there being sort of superior bloodlines and better people and worse people, is the concept of the Übermann or the Übermensch, right? Which is that there were essentially supermen among us that could do extraordinary things, and that those people needed to be released by society to go become literally supermen to guide the future for us. And it's a concept that we haven't we've used the term oligarchy, right, to describe Musk and Trump, but there is this kind of Uberman element to what's happening with us, which is sort of also this kind of pillar of Nazism. And, Elon Musk is an Uberman. He doesn't believe that the rules apply to him, that he is above it all, that these simple things like laws don't apply. Elon Musk came to Washington and he acted as if the American Constitution and our law didn't exist because, those are bothers to Ubermen. They transcend all of that. You get a lot of this in this Curtis Yarvin, crackpot, theory. But what's been incredible is that I think a lot of the tech bros and people in Trump world have kind of bought into this kind of neo-Uberman kind of, theory. And so it's not just, and so it is a remarkable sort of evocation of pure Nazism, right? In their understanding of, and so eugenicism is about how those that are unworthy need to be removed from society or cast aside or killed or, let die. And certainly the way to understand Robert Kennedy is that he is a kind of classic eugenicist, right? Yes. I mean, he's even talked about, just the other day, right? He was asked about bird flu. And his line was, we got to let it rip, right? We got to let it rip. We just got to let it go through, don't have measures, don't try to stop it. You got to let it rip. And the strong birds and the strong Americans, they'll survive. They'll come out fine. The weak ones, they'll get, they'll die. It's part of how Trump managed COVID, right? I mean, this is consistent with how they managed COVID.
Survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest. Or another way to look at it is that, the line I use of I'm speaking colorfully today in your show because it is required is that, it's like, fuck you all, right? Like there's at the core of this is a total, complete lack of concern for human beings.
Yes.
And that is outside of our kind of moral universe in democracies. It's also completely inconsistent with how a democracy could ever function, right? And so, I mean, we are in a place where miraculously some of the worst sort of manifestations of Nazism have been replicated I joke that Trump and Stephen Miller and these guys, we all studied Nazism to ensure that there were things that we never did. They studied Nazism in order to replicate it here in America, and it is shocking. And I think, by the way, consistent with all the arguments I'm making, I just don't think the country is going to kind of buy into this. And it's a central reason why the big ugly bill was so unpopular, which is that it was literally going to cause lots of people to die and to have less access to health insurance, health care.
Well, it's a silent, slow, painful death because these people who will lose their Medicare, and the number was around 17 million, I think.
Yep.
These are the people who don't have the voice. They are unheard, and so this is entirely organized. This is exactly what Trump wants. But it's not just Trump and Musk and JD. It seems to me all of them. I mean, this white supremacy is just so prevalent from Kristi Noem. I was listening to Brooke Rollins the other day, the director of agriculture. She said there'll be no amnesty. The mass deportations continue, but in a strategic way. And we move the workforce towards automation and 100% American participation, which with 34 million able-bodied on Medicaid, we should be able to do.
A completely made up number. I mean,
right.
The total number of people who are on, I think Philip Bump in the Washington Post just had an analysis of that number, and the actual number isn't 34 million. I think it was like 2 to 3 million, right? And so they can't. I mean, it's like they live in this alternative world, which is why, by the way, look. The reason why you and Midas and Courier Newsroom and Hopium and Substack, when we all began, I think we had a different understanding of our mission, right? Which was just to make sure that our point of view got out there. Now we become protectors of truth, right? Like in a way that was not, I don't think was really kind of part of the original mission, because they've become so fundamentally untethered and And this sort of this story, this fake rancid story that they present every day from the White House is so disconnected. It's unconcerned with truth. Or, as I wrote recently, it's maybe even worse than that, is that they're actually at war with truth, right? That the attacks on universities, the attacks on science, the attacks on, the media to sort of have them become more compliant, is that the central project of Trumpism now, in a very kind of classically authoritarian way, is to get reality to bend the knee to them. And that this exercise of the reality, of the bending of the knee of reality, the forcing of this false world with false statistics and false realities and false understandings to become real, is in essence like the central project of Trumpism right now, the White House. And what the reason why I have raised all this polling stuff is that it's not working, and it's really important. By the way, I mean, as many others have written, the reason why, Germany had in 1933, it had a very, very short history with democracy, and very, was still also had very significant trauma in recent times. We have a very long history of democracy here and muscle memory of democracy. And I think that, what Trump is learning is that, getting the country to bend the knee to him has been a lot harder than they anticipated. And I also think that federalism itself has made it far harder. The success of the Democratic attorneys general in continuing representing other governments, right? I mean, they represent governments of the United States against the federal government. They've been winning in court again and again and again. And I think that, he expected, in his madness and his delusions and his old age and his belief that he won the election by 85% and, the exaggerations of his victory, that he believed, I think, that the world and the people of America would just bend the knee to him. I really believe that he thought he was Superman, that he was the most powerful man in the world. And that when he told South Korea that they had to renegotiate a binding trade agreement that was in law, international law, and that they were going to have to make unilateral concessions, that they would be grateful to do so.
Right.
And what he's learned is that, he's gotten 0 trade deals in 90 days, not 90. Putin has mocked him and humiliated him. Netanyahu has defied his will. Every government in the world virtually has defied his will. The courts here are defying his will. The American people are defying his will. Fed Chair Powell is defying his will. And I think it's making him a little crazy. And
well, does it not ratchet things up, though? Because, we mentioned at the beginning that his war paint seems to get brighter when something goes wrong. And in all seriousness, I feel like when he's on the back foot, the orange goes on stronger and he bombs Iran. Right. Like that is the response to when the kid doesn't get the candy.
Right, the weekly wagging of the dog. I love the war paint. I'm going to credit you every day that I use that, and I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, no, he's no. I mean, look, he is escalating. Like, this is my whole point about earlier, is that Elon hurt him, did damage to him, and so he needed to restore his strength and his manhood and his power, and everything they've done to try to do that has failed.
Yes, and
it is, yes, it means that we should anticipate continued escalation. And what I interviewed Ann Applebaum recently, and she called it the spectacle of power, that, he needs the spectacular every day. And in one of my recent essays, what I mused about was, what is Trump going to do for the next 16 months, right? Yeah. Just on a day-to-day basis. I mean, he sees the world. He needs spectacular. He needs, as somebody in my site called it, I said bread and circuses, and he said it's circuses with no bread, is that, he needs the lion feeding every day, right?
But he thinks that's a functioning government. Isn't that why he says that Joe Biden was useless and did nothing? Is because Joe Biden ran the administration as it's supposed to be, with no drama. Right. And so unless there's daily drama and you're on the front pages for something dramatic, then you're not a good president.
Right. And he doesn't know any other way. And the problem is that what is left for there to create spectacular about, right? Yeah. he just passed his big bill. He's going to have another bill. He doesn't like to travel internationally. He's not welcome in most countries.
He's a felon, right? So he can't,
right.
travel. Yeah.
He doesn't like to go to these international events. I mean, is he going to start bombing, little islands in the Pacific, right? Like, I mean, what's he going to do to create the spectacular? And I actually, what I wrote about is that this is concerning to me, that he is going to need this continued kind of demonization. We've seen a huge ratcheting up of, and remember when this week, the attacks in Ventura County and in California, the America's breadbasket, those attacks mean our prices for food are going to go up, right? It means that crops are going to rot on the vine and animals are going to die. I listened to an interview with a farmer who in Indiana on NPR this week about how the raids that are happening in agricultural communities where there are animals is actually creating a potential huge biosecurity threat in America. And because the animals, we no longer can guarantee them to be free from disease and to be safe and secure because there aren't people to monitor them, and that the systems in place to monitor the biosecurity measures to monitor the health of disease in animals now is breaking down all across the country.
Yeah.
And so, what Trump is doing is he's starting to threaten our food supply, right? And also create domestic biosecurity problems through this kind of racial spasm, this racial hatred and spasm that is playing out all across the country. And it is unsustainable. Right. I mean, the reality is this is unsustainable politically in terms of our security, in terms of our food, in terms of our standing in the world, his ability to have the World Cup here next year, which is going to be important to him. This is going to start to become it's unsustainable. And I don't know where it goes. Right. But I think that one of the things that we have to do as we go forward is that we have to go forward with an understanding that he's not strong, that he's weak, that he's not winning, he's losing, that he's a villain and not a hero, and that he's
not thin, that he's fat.
Right, that he's not, that he's small, he's not big. And that gives us, if we start with that, then the likelihood of our success and our triumph and our victory will be far more likely than starting from a place where we are seeing not the old man behind the curtain, but the wizard, right? Yeah. We have to choose not to see the wizard every day. We have to choose to see the man behind the curtain.
But it's tough with the corporate media because they're not going to do that.
Right.
And I was listening to NPR the other day and they were saying President Trump has been working so hard this week on foreign policy. And I was thinking, I could probably do an hour on why that sentence is just wrong.
We have an incredibly powerful normalcy bias in America, right? And it is because we haven't been through this before. We don't have, like many cultures and many societies, have had a figure like Trump in their memory, in their cultural understanding.
Yes.
That we haven't really had. We've been so well governed for so long in many ways that we don't really have stories. I mean, the only story we have is us overcoming somebody like him and building a country to prevent somebody like him from ever coming back, right?
And like Watergate and, Clinton and Monica Lewinsky were like the kind of bumps in the road.
Right.
That was kind of it.
Right. And I think that, and so I think that I think there has been, and it's the reason why Midas exists. It's the reason that you exist. It's the reason Hopium exists. It's the reason Courier and Contrarian and everybody else exists, which is that, this has been really hard for our media and for our civil society and our corporations and our understanding, our collective understanding, to really come to terms with what we're dealing with. And that's why, and this is a good way to end, is that's why the fact that his poll numbers have come down so far should give us all incredible hope that we are going to overcome his rancid agenda of what I call sabotage, plunder, and betrayal, that we're going to overcome the complicity of the legacy media, and we're going to overcome all of that, right, and prevail. And that's why I end the week this week, more optimistic than I've been in a while, because despite all the advantages that he has to control the information environment, he's failing at it. And it's in part, though, because of the work you're doing and your Midas brothers and, this whole new explosion of pro-democracy media that's giving. Because remember, I want to just end with this, because I think this is a sort of a misunderstanding that exists about how information flows, is that, they built with a core sort of set of information warriors on the right, and then they built up, right? We have to there has to be millions and millions and millions of us connected to truth every day in order to spread that truth through the rest of society and to challenge the media, right? So that they know that there is a place where the numbers are correct and where the fake stuff isn't happening, to put pressure on them to not yield completely to the pressure that's coming from them, right? We're in this struggle with mainstream media where some days we have good days and more days we have bad days. But let's be clear, the Times and the Post and other news organizations have done a lot of damage to Trump because they've just reported on things that are happening. It's not all complicity and it's not all capitulation and appeasement, right? But our strength produces better legacy media because we put pressure back on them in this struggle that they all have every day. And so I want to just end with saying that, one of the things that's most remarkable about what's happened is that, I did an event with Ben Meiselas and Tara McGowan and Joe Trippi from what's now Resolute Square and David Rothkopf from Deep State Radio in January of 2023. And I had not yet moved to Substack. I mean, Substack was like not a thing yet, right, in our world. And now like every cool kid is there. But we talked about the need to grow pro-democracy media. And let's be very clear, we have come a long way. The success of Midas has been insane and incredible and inspiring and just amazing. And the growth of all the Substackers now. I used to be a pioneer, and now I'm like, I used to be on the beach by myself, and now it's crowded. I can't even get an umbrella anymore, right? And but we should also hearken back on the successes that we've had, and we are stronger as a pro-democracy media. We are winning some of the information battles. We are seeing our Democratic attorneys general, defeat him. We saw Schumer knock out really critical provisions in that sort of process with the Senate parliamentarian that made this horrific bill far less horrific in the last few weeks. We need to learn how to, if we're going to succeed and win, we need to celebrate the wins when they come and honor them and then build on them to get more. And I think that one of the things I just want to, end with is that it's very important as we go forward in this movement to not live in a place of perpetual disappointment, because that breeds demobilization and disengagement. And we need to recognize that we are having wins and that we need to honor them, celebrate them, and build on them. And that he is weak. He's not strong. He is failing. He's not succeeding. He is, he is a loser. He's not a winner. He is a villain. He's not a hero. All these things are true, and we have to fight like hell to make them true to more people. Yeah.
Well, the rest of the world sees it, and that's why they're realigning their military spend and joining up with Canada, and, the America is not involved in their future. And that really, to me, is a sign that people understand what is going on here. Okay, we have to finish, but I'm so grateful to you, Simon Rosenberg.
It's always good to be here. I appreciate an hour to just ramble on about stuff. It needs to be done, and I just appreciate the platform and your remarkable work.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5 Minute News or by joining the 5 Minute News YouTube channel. You can find me on Substack as well, and I'll come back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.